Hey guys, Derek here with Central Kentucky Motorsports, shop foreman here. I've been with the guys since they opened over on Palumbo. Now I'm running the shop. Today we're going to talk about CVTs and how to maintenance them, what they do, how they work, the individual parts, and what you can do to help prevent belt failure and problems that you might run into out in the wild. I'll start here with the primary. This attaches to the engine, the output shaft here. This is on a wedge, a V shape, and this has to be properly torqued when it is installed. It's very important that that's torqued. Otherwise, these can work loose. It can even squeeze these bearings in on the turbo models. After you've got it installed and you've got this thing running, one of the biggest complaints that we have is I go to put my machining gear and it creeps. It doesn't want to go in gear, it doesn't want to shift out. I don't understand what's going on. Take care of it. It's what's going on. Well, 9 times out of 10, there's a little bearing right here, and it's only on certain models, Polaris being one of them. This bearing here is where your belt rides, the center of this belt. And what it's designed to do is when the machine is idling, and this is down in the groove, what happens is this is turning, this is staying stationary. Well, dirt, dust, material, things get into this bearing in here, locks this thing up, and then what happens is the belt is trying to turn on this, which puts the transmission in a bind, prevents it from coming in and out of gear. You can test this. If you think this is what's wrong with your machine, you can put it on, shut the key off while you're trying to take it out of gear, and what that'll do is if it falls in, into neutral or into park or whatever you're trying to put it into, you know that this is preloading the transmission and causing issues on your machine. We can take these apart and rebuild them. 9 times out of 10, when they get to that point, we just replace the entire assembly. That being said, if we do replace the entire assembly, we have options. So we have aftermarket Assassins, makes this dandy here. This is a regular XP 1000 clutch. Comes with a billet outside cover. And what we do when we do them, we typically put in the aftermarket Assassins weight kits, and the way they work, factory, this thing doesn't have holes in it. It's just set to a certain weight, and the numbers will usually be printed on the back. And what that does, it tells you how much weight is in that arm. So when this machine is engaged, the centrifugal force of this spinning wants to fling these things out. And as it throws them out, it rolls against these little rollers here, and that's what pushes your clutch together. So how do we control that? How do we make it better? How do we control how fast it comes in, at what rate? Well, that's where these come in. This ramp has a lot to do with it, but more than that, these little holes here are where we put weights in. They're little magnets. They're pretty neat. And what that does, as we put the magnets in here and we put them in different spots, as you can imagine, if the weight is on the inside, it's closer to the center of rotation, so it takes more RPMs, more centrifugal force to start to flip this out. Now that being said, as you can see, as this rotates across the axis, as this moves up closer to the axis, these are farther away and they're on the perpendicular to the moment of rotation here. So as that comes up, it's getting farther or closer to and farther away from here. So that is multiplied exponentially as it rotates over. So we can take these weights, we start here, we put a lot of heavy weight here. It takes, it's closer to the center of axis, so it's helps right off the bat. But as we move them up here, it takes less weight to do the same thing. So as it comes up, you kind of get an effect, rotation slow. If you have more weight out here, as it cams over and gets past center, it flings out fast. So it's more kind of like a compound bow when you pull it back and it arcs over. Same situation with these as you move the weights in and out from the axis. That being said, there's a chart that comes with these. You can set them depending on tire size, what kind of riding you're doing, mud, sand, highway, whatever you may be doing, that changes. But that being said, that chart is not always 100% right, or it's not exactly where it needs to be. So that's where the expertise of the technicians and the guys here come into play, because they know what makes this work right. If your machine has this super high stall speed, and you're trying to give it gas and it's got this big delay, looks like an old drag car or something, where it, engages really late, it's not right. It's, That's not the way it's supposed to be. In my mind, the way I want my clutches to work, they need to work like factory with all the accessories and things that I've done to make it feel like it's stock, not some crazy on-off feeling or something of that nature. Moving on, this is a secondary clutch. Now, what does a secondary do that the primary doesn't? Why do we have things back here? What are these things? This is a XP clutch. This is a turbo clutch. These do not go together, but they're very similar in design. So this part right here is a helix. And what this thing does is, as you can probably, well, I don't know if you can see it. There's some right here on the inside. You can see these little teeth here. That is exactly what engages your transmission. A lot of people are under the impression that this aluminum part, this whole thing's turning your transmission directly. Well, what's happening is this thing right here is turning against these little ramps right here. Similar to the way this one here is designed. Here's one from an X3. Very, very similar in design, but it's a bigger model. I brought it over just so we could kind of get an idea of what's happening. So here's your rollers, or these little ramps here. Some of them have rollers. Some of them have ramps here. And what happens is this ramp is working against that spring. There's a spring sitting here. And as it's trying to engage, the vehicle is turning against this. So it has to turn this and then ramp against those ramps. So what does that mean? That spring, the tension of this spring makes it load dependent. So when this spring is stiff, it's going to make it more resistant to running up those ramps. So what does that mean? How can we fix that? What can we do to modify that to make it work better for your application? You know, whether it be sport riding, farming, whatever, high load situation. Well, a high load spring pushes against that, and what it does is as the weight increases in, say, the bed of the vehicle, this pushes against those ramps, which forces this clutch to stay together longer. What does that mean? If this stays together longer, that means that this belt is riding up higher in this groove for a longer period of time. What does that mean? Well, just like an automatic transmission, if we keep it in first gear for a longer period of time, we can pull more weight because we've kept the gear ratio down as we're going. So the negative side of it, you know, well, if that's the case, why don't we just make it as strong as we can make it? Well, belt wear. Belt wear, you know, there's always a trade-off. So as we put more weight on this thing up here, the primary, is working against it because it's trying to go together and it's trying to pull the belt down deep in this groove to separate this to drive the machine, which gears up the machine. It's shifting. It's what's happening. So as we do that, and this is really trying to make that weight move. So we keep ramping up the RPM. It drags this belt down into the groove, or tries to drag it down, and we got this big heavy spring in here stopping that. So what happens? The belt is under extreme load, you know. So how do we fix that? Belts, good belts. We have, Daniel's got all kinds. We got the G-Boost belt here from Trinity. We got a couple other brands up there. World's best belt, I think, from Super ATV. We've got it there. We love those belts. And as you know, every modification you make is going to find the weakest link. We have the knowledge, we have the expertise to figure out where that next step is and where those situations are going to occur before you have to go through the trouble of installing them, figuring out what's wrong, you know, what did I do wrong? So to wrap it all up, what do you get here when you come to Central Kentucky Motorsports? You don't just get some guys turning a wrench. You don't just get some guy wanting to sell you parts. What you get here is you get professionalism, high quality tools, the best technicians, and a staff like no other. If you have time, swing on by, just see us, visit, ask questions. As far as scheduling appointments, things like that, give us a call. Phone number 859-888-0740. If there's anything I can do for you, my name is Derek Halsey again. Hope to see you on the trail.